Yeah, absolutely. I think you have a perfect voice for this sort of podcast. It has a deep resonance. I think that often is something that people are looking for in a radio voice. Not always, but it has a soothing quality. But also, you have I don't know how to describe it, but like a curiosity in the way that you talk, even if you're just speaking about something you're not curious about. I feel like you're going to take us on an adventure just with the tone of your voice. I don't know how to describe it.
Good. Well, I try to bring that curiosity to it. And there are two other major influences here that we can introduce at this point. One is my biological father, who I did not know, did not grow up with. And part of the issue was he was Jewish. And when my mother sat me down to tell me that, I was maybe 14 at the time, and I had been raised by a stepfather since very early on who was African American. So I grew up in this racially mixed family, and my Jewish father, I later found out I was able to meet him, and that's a whole nother story. Turns out he had a radio show. He was a writer. He was a very charismatic guy, which is how my mother came to be drawn to him. And so he had a radio show. He was also a communist. It was the West Coast communist radio show back probably in the 30s. So there was a lot for me to digest there, to come to terms with all of this stuff. But I wasn't thinking of him at all when I started this podcast. And it wasn't until fairly recent years that I'm doing my father.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you found out about it, when you were a younger person, how'd you feel about it?
Well, I felt horrible about it because I grew up in a black neighborhood, largely. We kind of very chaotic early life, and so there were times when we lived off of Sunset Strip, and other times when we were in this largely African American neighborhood, where I ended up spending most of my adolescence years. So I was prepared psychologically to be black, pretty much. I remember when I was a little kid and my playmates would say, "Hey man, what are you?" And I'd say, "I'm half white milk, half chocolate milk." And that seemed to satisfy them, and it satisfied me. So I think it must have been at that age that I thought that this was my biological father, although he was very, very different than me. So let's see, where was I going with this? Oh, so when my mother told me at about age 14, for one thing, there is a lot of Jewish anti-Semitism in the black community. Justifiably so. They were ripped off for years by merchants, and some of the time. And I knew about the Holocaust. And I realized that, whoa, had I been born in Germany, I would have been killed in the Holocaust. I would have been sent to the ovens. And so I vowed in that moment silently, didn't say anything to my mother about it, but I just decided I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm never going to tell anybody. Why should my children that I might have someday have to carry this burden? So I'm just not going to tell anybody. Well, leap ahead many years. I'm in graduate school at the University of Michigan, just started at the University of Michigan, clinical psychology, and I'm walking in the evening with a lovely young female graduate student, colleague, and somehow I decided to come out to her. I realized that somehow, just intuitively, I realized, you know what? There will be a cost to carrying this secret. I grew up carrying secrets. The secret of having a black father at home when I was at a lily white fundamentalist school that I went to, one of many. So I came out to this girl, and she said, "Oh, I knew there was something good about you. That's wonderful." And she was just so welcoming that from then on, I've not felt the need to be at all closed about it. And actually, there's so much to be proud of in the Jewish tradition and so on, and a whole other set of stories there.